poverty trends, inequality trends. Then we shall go to specific drivers, red flags, existing policy interventions. I hope my friends are here in the Bank of Uganda and Ministry of Finance, and then policy recommendations. The study was done by myself, and don't sacrifice Oxfam. Oxfam financed this study, but I wrote this report, and I'm in the dock now with Oxfam, but me, I'm in a bigger side of the dock. So I should take responsibility for any serious mistake in that study. But if the report is very good, then we shall share the good things with Oxfam. Now, the objective was to understand the dimensions of poverty, to establish the specific drivers, strengthen policy engagement. That's what we are doing right now, and see where we can go. The meaning of inequality is what we want you to know. What is the meaning of inequality, and that's what it is. If you see there, that's what it is. You see these guys here, and look at these guys who are just living here. Those who come from Kenya, I'm talking about Muthaiga versus Chipera. If you are in Lagos, I'm talking about the upper part of Lagos versus Salami Nibadan. Here I'm talking about Kororo versus these other parts where people are living in conditions you cannot believe. The national poverty trends in Uganda have been very impressive. Poverty has reduced from 1992 to now, and the Right Honorable Speaker may want to know, together with the members of Parliament, that the government needed to be congratulated for making sure that poverty can come down. But wait a minute and see what does this mean. From 1992, it was 56%. Now, 19.7%. What are we talking about? And which data are we using? This is the slide I want to bring to your attention. The 56% which was poor, and the 19.7% where we are now, every 10 people that you see in Uganda, 2 of them cannot afford the meal. That's what it is. 20 out of 100, 2 out of 10, and 1 out of 5. This is not a very bad situation, as you can see. Now, what we are talking about that is bad is that actually who is part of that 20%, 19.7. And this is what it is. I want to draw your attention to this. Do you see this? This is in the central region, and it's just 6. But look at this, which is 47% of the population, northern Uganda, which is a part of Uganda as well, that still is living under that situation. Now, if you want to now use that data the way we use it, then of course it will hide. It is going to hide most of those things we are talking about. So you need to interrogate the data and find out if you say 20% of the people are the only ones living under poverty, but in 1992 it was 56, government has done extremely well, isn't it? Government has done extremely well. What is that vis-a-vis the Ugandans whom you are talking about? This is the reason why you are seated here. You are not seated here to be told that we are doing very well, but you are here seated here to ask yourself whether you are part of that doing well, which we are talking about. That's the reason that all of you should be. So in brief, Central region is 6, Northern is 47, and let's do this. If Central region is 6, and in 1992 it was 45.6, it is now 6 here. That means that for these 72.2% who were also poor in 1992, and they are now 47 here, how many years is it going to take them also to reach here? If you just those who are just crude mathematics, forget about log odds and so on, crude mathematics, 6 minus 47 is 41, divided by 20 to get it is because it's every year, it is 1, 1, 1. So it will take actually 41 years from now to be able to be with the same people who are in the central region. This is not good, ladies and gentlemen. It's not good at all. Now, how about if we say poverty is reducing, who actually is reducing in terms of being poor and is improving. Is that this, the way we calculate this, those of you who may not have gone in very serious mathematics and economics classes, is that, let's go to a little bit of economics class, very elementary economics, just right now. The way we interpret these figures, this one and that one, is that if all the money that we had now, just right now, give the money to Right Honorable Speaker here, all of us, and she distributes all of that money to us now in this room equally. It is the simplest, the way we explain this, is that if we take now that money equally, all of us, that figure, that graph, the way it is moving, the figure should actually be 0.0. If every Ugandan was now getting the right money, if we are all getting equal money from the GDP and from the national budget, everybody gets the same, you get that number 0.0. However, if the whole of that money is just eaten by one person, just got by one person, that number would be 1.0. That's how we measure countries. The country which has been beating all of us in the whole world for the last 10 years is actually Norway. We need to congratulate Norway. And then Iceland, which was, of course, a province of Denmark up to 1985, and it broke off. Iceland now has beaten Norway 2 times. Now, it is now Iceland, Norway, and Uganda. The other day was representing you, Right Honorable Speakers, you know. I'm the one who represented you when the Queen of Elizabeth came here, and Godband, we wrote the report. We summarized all the 53 African countries and Commonwealth countries up to Australia. And the issue was that Uganda is number 152 out of the 187 with 0 point. The country is not doing well in terms of the equality of sharing of the national resources. This is the point that this graph, when you see that graph going up, if it was Canada, if it was New Zealand, if it was Denmark, if it was the Netherlands, that graph would almost be moving just around here. It will simply be just around here, with the constant gradient equal to 0, almost. It wouldn't be moving in this direction now. If the oil resources come, and so on, I don't know whether this graph is going, you think it's going to move like this down, or it's going to move like this up, and that's the question I leave you. But we are not doing well in terms of the sharing of the growth. This graph clearly explains that growth is being shared by few. You cannot dispute that. If you want to dispute it, bring your own data and just put it here. We shall accept. Now, how about the proportion? I think my sister Catherine has already explained this. Thank you very much. You have already interpreted this graph. This is what she was explaining. If Professor Nwagaba is saying the Ugandans are not sharing to national resource, and the national resource basket, which you call GDP, who is now sharing it? Who is sharing it? Who is on that dining table? And this is what it is. This one shows, I've taken all the countries of East African community. Our farm, Right Honorable Speaker, is also the one in charge of developing the strategic plan for all the 6 countries. I'm the one in charge of that. I'm in charge of the task to make sure that Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Burundi, South Sudan is also coming on board, can move on the same trajectory. Now, this data, which I have from Arusha, is that, just look at it. For it, what we do, we take the 10% of the population and see they reach 10% of that population. What wealth do they have? Then again, the 40% down, what wealth do they have? The middle ones, the way God made us, is that the middle ones are always in the middle like that. They just say, well, if you're a teacher, I'm a teacher, are you bothered with the children who are just getting 56, 60? No. You are bothered with one who is getting 90 to 100, and then the one who is about 0 to 20, and if there is acceleration is there, that's where you are bothered with. As teachers, that's what we are normally bothered. In the same thing, in management of economies, we are normally bothered with that. How many people are the richest and about the poorest? Now, in Uganda's case, Uganda is around there, as you can see, that and there. For Tanzania, Tanzania is doing very well, as you can see. With their political economy, as you all know, Tanzania is not by accident, it is that. Kenya is this one here. I've been seeing what Kenya has been happening. Kenya was a colony, Uganda was a protectorate, as you all know. And we don't have time to go into that political economy. But these are the explanations. Rwanda is this. The genocide is around there, and you can see the implications and so on. We don't want to go into that. But on Uganda's case, which is that. And since oil and gas is going to come, I want you to also ask whether this is going to be moving like that, or to now take a trajectory that is going in the ceiling. I have enough experts here who are going to explain that. But this graph means that the people who are partaking of the national resources are few. Actually, the 10% of the people, the 10% rich, are having a more wealth flow than the other ones. I'm going to finish now. The drivers, specific drivers, are public expenditure decisions. This is what is bringing this, public expenditure decisions. Where are we doing investments? This is the question. Where are we doing public investments? If you go to South Korea under General Park, with this daughter, Park Geun-hye, who had just lost the presidency, and I know General Park is turning in his grave for the daughter to do that. This daughter is the last thing we had expected to happen in South Korea. But General Park had made very, very good public investments, which targeted the poor, in special education, investments in agriculture, and transforming that agriculture sector. These things you are seeing, everybody now can see has Samsung. The owner of that Samsung had just a store of rice. He had just a shop in Seoul selling rice. But it's virtually the one who is the largest, almost the largest corporate company in the world, Samsung. Together with this one, Samsung, where we are buying these clothes. These are public investments that can really turn around the country and everybody benefits. Not having public investments where only a few are benefiting. Look at this as I finish. If the Ugandan economy is growing, which we have all accepted, it is one of the countries, Right Honorable Speaker, this country is growing at a rate which nobody can believe. And you also see it. You spend 2 months without coming to town. You will see how many, again, arcades have come up. And that's how we measure GDP. Billions of value. But where is, now currently the GDP of 24.6 billion US dollars is a very small country. But where is the GDP coming from? This is what this slide is about. Where is it coming from? And as you can see, I'm very, very bothered with this. You look at this, that. This is agriculture. That one there. This is services, Right Honorable Speaker. This is Stanbic Bank, Barclays, Stanchart, Airtel, MTN, and so on. I want you to ask you a small question here. Just let me ask a small question as a teacher. If your mother here, if you have your mother that is working in MTN, your mother is working in Airtel, your mother is working in Stanbic Bank, put up your hand. Just put up your hand. We are all here in Rotary. I'm in Rotary Club of Muyenga and I'm a major donor. That's what you have been told. We have what you call, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Does it build goodwill and better friendships? Is it fair to all concerned? This is what Rotary, what drives the world in Rotary. And Bill Gates has these days giving us a lot of money. We are the ones doing immunization. You better actually clap for us. All this immunization you see. No single child of polio now. We only have 2 cases in Nigeria. But in Rotary we are asking, is this fair? And I want to also ask it here, is it fair that the sector which is democratic, it is the sector which is the 80%, 76, Right Honorable Speaker, to 80% of the people working in the agriculture sector, contributing 22.1% of GDP, and 44.3% of GDP, coming from now Airtel, MTN, but I'm not saying we shouldn't have direct foreign investment. I'm supporting the president, I've advised the president and all the other presidents in Africa, not only President Museveni, but also others, that we should attract direct foreign investment. But those who understand economics very well of transformation, Rustos tells you the stages where you pass through. And I want to agree with Rustos as a traditional economist that there is no way you are going to wish away agriculture. You stand and wish it away. It will not go. It is here. It is here. And you cannot claim that you're not going to put investments in agriculture because you're having borders. These are the ones here. And you're having this MTN and Airtel. What are you going to do with the 80%? with the people who are there. Now, in the UK, in the US, in many countries, you agricultural sector, you can say how much percentage is agriculture contributing to the US economy. Correct. But how many also people are engaged in the agricultural sector in the US? That's the question for Ugandans. They're also not there. So you cannot wish away a sector that has the greatest, right honorable speaker, number of people. You are going to have a disaster. I therefore want to advise the government here. I want to advise Uganda government very, very emphatically that we must do something serious on agriculture, especially in investment, in financing, in insurance, in land tenure system and management regime, that something must be done on agriculture if you want transformation. If you want to tell me that we're going to have motor vehicles and compete with Japan and Toyota and Mitsubishi, you go ahead, that you're going to compete with Mitsubishi. That you're going to compete with Mitsubishi. You are going to have agriculture capture the global chain and capture global money and capture the global niches where money is. But with the sector that you are familiar with first. And once we are done with that and the number of people there, then you can move to manufacturing. After all, manufacturing, we need agriculture. We also need agriculture. And you need aggregate demand for the other people in agriculture to consume your commodities. That's what General Parker did in South Korea. That's what people in Malaysia did. So that now people who have money can buy your commodities. Otherwise, are you going to tell me that we're going to be an export economy only? And who's going to buy your products? Ugandans will not buy your products. Which products are you going to be those? So you need agricultural sector, you need services, but you are jumping. In Uganda, you are jumping the gun. Basoka kwavula, that's what the Baganda say. Basoka kwavula, you cannot have a child who is just from the mother's breast and just running. Even the mother will run away if you have a child like that. If you are a mother here, won't you run away? Your child who is breastfeeding and start running on her legs or his legs, you run away because he's just working out of the normal. In economics, that's also what it is. I'm just finishing, Charles. Next is the trend in agricultural budgeting. This is the work of the right honorable speaker is here. She's the one who is in charge of our money, in case people didn't know, to appropriate it. She's the one who appropriates. The president only gives us, but you're the one who appropriates. She's the one who tells us this money should go here and this one should go here. If she refuses, the money cannot go in that sector. And we want to thank you for the good work, Madam Speaker. But we need you to pay attention to the financing of agriculture. It has been oscillating between 5, I think now it is 3%. It is not possible that you can have serious investment to lift now the other 22.1% GDP with 3% budget of agriculture. And the Honorable Chisamba is here. He's the world specialist in that. And we have agreed it is not possible to transform this economy. Don't ask many questions why the economy is not transforming. People are in a sector which is economically democratic, the most economically democratic, but is not the one who now partaking of these investments. Lastly, we have corruption, which is taking most of the resources. And then we have inequality in job opportunities. I will leave that to discussion. Land access and insecurity. This one, Ugandans, we are new. These are new things which we have, particularly issues of the land grabs. Dr. Muhumuza is here, you can see him. Land grabs in the oil region, land grabs everywhere. People cannot invest seriously unless there is the security of tenure. You know, right, Speaker, the problems we have in Bunyoro with the Bachiga who migrated there is that the Bachiga who migrated to Bunyoro did not have to own the land that they have. But the Constitution under Article 237, Article 246, if you synchronize those articles, you, especially subsection 1 to 8, you realize that you don't need to own land in order to invest in it, but you need to know what they call vested interest. The Bachiga had to invest in that land. I know no university here can open unless this Bachiga and everybody in these areas in Kasesa have brought beans and maize because people are producing on this land. So people have land access is very, very important. It's extremely important. People cannot have anything on the land unless there is access and utilization of that land. Other drivers are in access to financial capital. This will come in discussion. The banking is only 8.3 banked population. And I will bring to your attention, right honorable, that in some countries which are near to us, is as far as 40%. Then you have regressive tax policies. I'm sure somebody from URA and finance are here, my friends in finance. You cannot have taxes which are narrow, the tax base which is still very narrow, people evade tax. Let's broaden the tax base. And also let's not have the poor to be the ones taxed, and then the rich have the tax holidays. This will not work. Let's go to Turkey and see how Turkey is handling that process, and also in Addis. And then you have social cultural practices that keep women poor. These are very clear to you. And then conflict and insecurity. The red flag, which is, I think, our last slide, is that I want to bring to your attention this. Catherine, I think there is another slide you should have brought to people to their attention. The 10% here, this 10% of the Ugandan population, look at just 10% of your neighbors and so on. They were sharing 29.9, is what Catherine was talking about, and these days they share 36 to 35.8%. They have been growing at 19% positive growth. Now the last ones, who are 10% last, they share just 3.2. The 3.2, let me speak Keith Mwakani's language. The 3.2 has now declined to the 2.5, the 2.5 only of the national budget. So right now, even the small share of the national cake, if you want, which the poorest were sharing, has also reduced at a very serious rate, while the other ones has increased. These are not good indicators for a country which is supposed to be stable. These things, right honorable speaker, are not good for, I think I just finished, 30 seconds. This is not good for a country which is looking for stability. So we need people to be rich. We are not saying people should not be rich. But it's not good, you all know it, to be rich at the expense of your neighbor. Robert McNamara, as I finish, he was our president of the World Bank when America was fighting Vietnam, and he was Secretary of Defense in the Pentagon. He said this statement, that the poor can be scattered and you don't mind. But once the poor are conglomerated and you continue ignoring them, that conglomeration, they can deal very, very destructively to you, or you have to deal very decisively to them. You need to harmonize those positions. Otherwise, you are going to tell me that you are going to build a house and erect a 14-feet wall. It is not possible for you to sleep in that house. Are we sleeping in those houses with 14 perimeter walls? You are not sleeping in those houses. I was in Canada at Munini Mulira's house, going for hospital check-up in South Lake Hospital in Toronto. And I had to work in Ottawa. We had just work in Ottawa to look at African money, the money which is coming in is African. These Africans are stealing it. That's all the money being stolen. So when I finished work in Ottawa, I just continued to Toronto. Let me go check at my hospital for a little bit of check-up and so on. The people in Canada, not only in Toronto, Toronto is like Soro of Uganda. It is very many kilometers from Ottawa in the capital. And that's why the hospital here where I was, if you want to know how inequality is. The hospital, I was in the hospital, eventually I went for a surgery actually. Liver surgery, I took a liver surgery. 3 hours, 17 minutes in the theater. And when I came out, I was in the hospital alone. Where are people in the hospital? There is no sickness. In fact, this was the sorrow of Canada. I was told if I died at the operating table, the hospital superintendent should have resigned, the Minister of Health should have resigned. Nobody is supposed to die, whether you are a hospital in Kisoro or in Karamoja or in... There is no reason of coming to Mulago. For them, that's how their countries are. There's no reason. And I finished the operation and came. In fact, I've heard now that hospital, when I was discussing with the Munini Mulira, he's organizing for us. As I sit down, I need to tell you this also. Our Ugandan, in the names of Sam Wori, is the one who has been elected by Rotary International as the Rotary President of all 192 countries. This is a Ugandan. He's a Ugandan. So I think there is equality now almost at the global stage. Only in Uganda is what we want now. So I left Toronto very, very happy. Whether you are in Kisoro, whether you are in Mulago, whether you are in Kotido Hospital, you should get services, isn't it? That's the message. And it was operated very, very well without any problem. I don't need to go to Mulago. So the message is, Policy recommendation is to invest in people, increasing growth, making corruption a high-risk venture, enforcing local content, in public investment, enhanced accessibility for everybody, then effective governance and active citizens. That's the message I want to leave to you. It is not President Museveni. You are not going to tell me that it is President Museveni to transform the country. It is, well, effective state, which is correct, but also active what? Citizens. Must be active citizens. Don't behave as if you are Bagwira, as if you are immigrants in this country. This country is yours. It is for all of us. So you must all work as active citizens, work with an effective state. The state must be very effective. Parliament must be very effective. Question the executive. And can you clap for the right honorable speaker? This lady has been asking very serious questions. She has been asking very serious questions. And also asking stupid orders. Asking very stupid orders. That's from executive and judiciary. And that's what we want. That's what we mean by very, very effective state. A state which is alert. And also we shall also be alert. But you can't expect us to be alert, and the state is very weak, and the country can move. It cannot. Thank you very much, Charles. I'm done.
Thank you very much, Professor Augustus Nwagaba. We know where we are now.
Hey, thank you.
I realize the danger with how much we can be patient with the time, but I also realize why Professor Nwagaba almost came to Parliament, because he did make an attempt in the last elections. So he should have been raising these questions on the floor of Parliament.
Charles, I was just wondering, Professor Nwagaba, you talked about so many of the drivers for inequality, but I think you were just shy from saying one of the biggest drivers is actually corruption. Why didn't you stress it? Maybe during the panel discussion
we'll have that in the panel discussion. We have a live audience, so for our viewers on NTV, thank you for joining us. They've been with us for some time since Professor Nwagaba started, but just to bring them up to speed, and to also ask us who are in here, especially the people at the back, that if you keep moving up and down, you are running in the images on TV, so kindly minimize movement. And when we make our contributions, let's make sure that we're giving each one an opportunity to make their contribution and then be able to move on. We are going to have a slight change in the program if you have a copy, and which I'll announce in a moment. But thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Kisamba Mugerwa, the former Minister of Agriculture and one of the most experienced agricultural experts in this country. And he's now the chairman of the National Planning Authority, seated next to the speaker. There are some other people in the audience I'll be recognizing as we move along. But I would like at this point to invite the Speaker of Parliament to speak to us, launch the report, and after launching the report, then we'll have Dr. Muhumuza discuss the report and launch us into the panel discussion where all of us can participate and join in the debate. So can I ask the country director again to do the honors to invite you officially and to launch this report for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much again, Charles, for asking me to come and invite the Right Honourable Speaker of our Parliament. As I said earlier, she is somebody we hold with high esteem. She has been very passionate about these issues of marginalization and vulnerability. And I know from her profile that how she grew up and how she went to school suggests a certain spread. It's very difficult to see a person honestly come from Busoga to go and study in St. Catherine in the north. It means that opportunities at that time were fairly spread. But these days, if you have a child whom you love and want to succeed in education, there's a certain line, a certain geography where they have to go. It is difficult to have a child you like go and study in Kitgum. It's very difficult, or in Kapchora for that matter. So without spending too much time, I want to ask you, the Right Honourable Speaker, to come to speak to this report, address the audience, and then we move on from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, the head of Oxfam. You know, I want to tell you something. I had not met this man. So when he wrote to me, I read the name Kamalingam. Then this must be a man from Sri Lanka. But I'm happy to know that he's made in the highlands on the Kenya-Uganda border. So Dr. Ksava Mugirwa of NPA, our distinguished academicians, development partners. I don't know whether are my members here. Yes. Some of my members are here. Yes, thank you very much. I'm glad to see you. And I want to thank Oxfam for giving me the opportunity to speak on some of the issues that I've been talking about for some time, and to be able to highlight issues of inequality and bring them into the public domain so that we can all understand them. Unfortunately, sometimes at the end of an exercise, that's when you realize that there is something you didn't do, the people did not consult, but policy has gone, and it has to affect people. Last financial year, after we'd done I think it was the finance bill, we had been working on the taxes, adjust here, raise money, and so on. We had been fighting a battle, I think, for kerosene, to remove the taxes. They said, no, you must find money from somewhere else. So unfortunately, the lot fell on water. Now, 2 days after, maybe about a week after we had made that adjustment in taxes, I received a call. So a woman rang me and said, I wanted you to know that the adjustments you made in the taxes have reduced my supply of water. I used to be able to buy 5 jerrycans of water, but now I can only buy 2. I don't know how I'm going to run my family. You know? Oh, I said, oh my God, what did we do? So I told her, okay, let me undertake that next financial year, I'm going to be alert on this issue and make sure that we resolve it. So, and then I remembered, I think when the 7th Parliament, there is a microfinance law we made, and we made the minimum, what do you call it, you bankers? What you require to start a bank? 4 billion. Yes, 4 billion Uganda shillings. You know, passing it was simple. Okay, because we had that time when these banks were closing down and so on. So we said, okay, 4 billion. Then afterwards said, but suppose me, Rebecca Kadaga, wanted to start a bank. Where would I raise the 4 billion from? If a youth wanted to start a bank, where would you raise the money from? But it had happened. The law had been made. So there are many things that happen, maybe because of not deep enough consultation. The bank, Honorable, my friend, you know that's one of my favorite bachigas. Banking services. I'm proud to have 2 banks in Kamuli. I'm proud because Stanbic and Centenary. I'm proud because I had to lobby hard to get the Centenary Bank from the Archbishop. Each time it had several Archbishop. So, you know, I had been writing to the Bank of Uganda to say we need more services on this side. And in my letters to the Minister of Finance and the bank manager, Bank of Uganda, I said when I was young, there were 3 banks in Kamuli. The Cooperative Bank, Greenless Bank, and Barclays Bank. So I kept saying, if in the 60s those banks were viable, what's happening now? No one could answer those questions. So, you know, if those days, if you went to Kamuli on a day when they are paying, you'd think there's a public rally. Because the people of Ruka, of Buyende, they are all in Kamuli looking for money. And the whole place is like a public rally. So I want to thank the Archbishop of the Catholic Church for responding to my call to get us an additional bank there. But I still need a bank in Buyende. I need a bank in Ruka because you can't get services. You can imagine someone like the Speaker of Uganda not being able to get a loan to construct my hotel in Kamuli. Why? It's far. UDB. I applied to them. They encouraged me. You have done 3/4 of the work. Hey, we shall give you money. You bring this paper. I don't do this. Hey. I wanted 600 million shillings to complete, not to start a hotel, complete. So after about 9 months, I said, but madam, you had applied for too much money. Maybe you take 200. I said, gentlemen, if I wanted 200, I would have said it. I want 600, so I cannot take the Uganda Development Bank. Speaker. I've been writing every financial year to the Minister of Finance. Can you create incentives in the budget? Banks to move outside Kampala. I've been writing. I've got a file of letters. Create incentives for the banks to get out. No, nobody's interested. This liberalized economy, for some things, yeah, some things, but they are liberalized. Others, I don't know. So anyway, in Parliament, we lobbied for long for an agricultural bank. It's a recommendation make every, I think even when you were there. Yes, we used to say that. Nothing. Construction bank is part of our resolutions. Nothing. If you want money for anything in this country, you go for a commercial loan. How viable is that? How viable is that? But we talk to ears which are blocked. Anyway, I think let's join hands and speak more. On the issue of equity, I think I've done my work. We have introduced in the Public Finance Management Act the certificate of gender and equity. But took us 11 years in that house. 11 years. And even now, the Minister of Finance is fighting it. Last year they tried to come and they wanted to repeal. I said, over my dead body. Now the other week I heard someone said, madam, they are coming again. I said, they're coming again. I said, they'll still find me there. And no one would repeal that law. But you know, why did you need a certificate of gender equity? The issues which have been talked about. Who has got what? Who is getting what? For whom have we planned? How much? That's why we did that certificate. But the Minister of Finance, they're really busy. But I'm here. So, yes, I accept that the issues of inequality are there. Let's work together to make sure that that we can, if we cannot eradicate, let us lessen them. I think with all our collective voices, we have the power to change the situation. And I think the time is now, and let us do it. So I really want to thank Oxfam for sponsoring, Professor Nwagaba for doing the needful. I want now to launch the report so that you can discuss it, and we take some positions. Thank you so much.
Madam Speaker, may I request that the beautiful ladies behind you there, just behind the podium where you're standing, is where you're going to do us the honors to launch the report. Yes. Need to move. Dr. Kisamba Mgero, if you could move close to the launch of that report.
Nwagaba, where are you?
Professor Nwagaba is there. It's your report. For our TV audience, we're coming live to you from Serena Katonga Hall, and the Speaker of Parliament, the Honorable Rebecca Alitwala Kadaga, is launching the Oxfam Inequality Report, looking at inequality in Uganda. And asking the big question, who is growing?
So let me commend this report to you. Read it, understand it, discuss it, and let's find a way of reducing the inequality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The Speaker has to leave us because she has other important duties to attend to. So thank you very much for making time to launch this report. You can read a little bit more. She has a piece in the report itself when you get a copy. Copy is available at the back, but I request that we don't pick them now because we will disrupt. We have a live audience on TV, and we need them to have clear images to know exactly what we're doing here and join us in the discussion. And the hashtag #EndInequalityUG is trending as we speak, so please join in and be part of the discussion.
Next, we'll hear from Dr. Fred Muhumuza. Like we told earlier, we've had several people put in energy and efforts to put together this report. And so we'll hear from Dr. Fred Muhumuza, who is going to present a discussion paper on this very report. We're going to request that all the questions that you have come during the panel discussion. We'll listen and keep all the questions that you have. We'll bring them up during the panel discussion. Dr. Fred Muhumuza, please.
Let me remind Dr. Muhumuza as he comes on the podium that we'd agreed with Professor Nwagaba to use 20 minutes. He used 30. So we're going to request that you use 10 minutes, but I'm actually going to say use 7 minutes so that if you overlap, you use 10 minutes. Thank you.
Can I use 5?
Yes.
I have the podium. So now you can go and decide what to use. All protocol observed. Thank you very much. Mine is to emphasize a few things on the way of going forward, but also to recognize that the report touches quite interesting issues. For once, you have a report that goes further than just the 19% movement of poverty from the 56 to get into the segmented disaggregation of percentages, who actually is getting what. But I want to begin by saying some of the indicators we have been using to measure poverty were set 25 years ago. And the people who actually introduced these indicators to us are advising us to move on to other more relevant indicators to our times, and that's the World Bank. The poverty of 19% is $1 a day. Surely we all agree $1, which is 3,600 shillings a day, is not the relevant thing you would want anybody to have. So that indicator has been revised to $1.90 US cents, which is almost $2. And when you follow that, it does not take away the progress that Uganda has made in reducing poverty. It's still half. We have reduced poverty by half. But it brings in the reality that now the poor or poverty levels are at about 34%, which speaks more to what me and you see rather than the 19%. Because every time I see more people around, I'm like, is this the 19? But now when it is 34%, talking about a population of 35 million, you are actually talking about a figure of 12.5% poor people. Now that is more realistic for us to address. More realistic for us not to sleep and slumber that we have made progress, but to know that there is still a journey ahead of us. And I don't have to go through the decomposition of deciles, which showed us that even the growth we have registered is going more to the rich, which is similar to the global figure. And by the way, the global figure where they are saying there are now 8 people sharing what 3.5 billion people own, that figure has reduced from 63 in about 2 years, meaning the inequality is even accelerating as we go along. The same is true in Uganda, and I will touch on one of the key drivers of these inequalities and how we possibly want to address them. The reality we see here and all the government programs that have been done in the 25, 30 years speaks to many things that these programs are not being sufficiently effective in doing what they are supposed to be. It is one thing for the airplane to taxi on the runway, but it needs to get to a certain minimum speed in order to take off. So a lot more needs to be done. We are moving, 3.5, growth of 6, growth of 5, growth of 4, but it's not sufficient to get people out of poverty, worst still to get them out of vulnerability. You have more vulnerable people than poor people. Vulnerability in Uganda is about 43%. Those are people who are slightly above the poverty line, but anytime they fall back. And one of the studies that was done indicated that 2 out of 3 people who had gone out of poverty between 2006 and 2009 actually fell back into poverty. We are yet to analyze the effect of the drought of last year. It is possible so many others have fallen back. So we don't just need to push people above the poverty line, but actually beyond. And that speaks to what else do we need to do within our government programs? What else do we need to do with the government institutions? Traction is not sufficient to get these people out. And you see that education, we have made progress. But when you again decompose, you are going to realize that among the 20% bottom, household heads who have finished primary school are about 23%. Now you all know that at that level you don't build any skills. When you make it 40%, the figure drops further even to about 11%. So you have more people who have gone to school, but they have stopped in primary, where we don't even build skills. So you can no longer expect the benefits of education to come out of those household heads who never went beyond the primary. So much as we're saying we've made progress in education, we are yet to get the traction needed to get these people out. Access to health services, access to land, the issues have been raised here, access to justice. These are the perpetrators of inequality. There are a lot of people on the surface, the programs are there, but the programs are not impacting the population as we would expect. So we need to have more effectiveness within the government programs than we have actually possibly believed we are having. Number 3, what are the challenges? Effective government. As I've said, there are lots of government programs, but they are not effective. We all know, and it is not a lie, government itself will tell you implementation of its programs is cumbersome. The other day, the World Bank suspended loans because of implementation. So if programs are not being implemented, how do we expect the people to move forward? So we really need to say, where is effective government? What has happened? How do we bring government back? Is decentralization working? What exactly is going on? You get to a hospital, and I saw the report that came out of Mitiana, where a mother died because people asked her to bring a tube to transfer the blood from the bottle into her body. They said, we don't have them. But actually, government had delivered over 400 of these tubes, and they were in the hospital setting. So if these kinds of things continue, people will continue to die for free. And that is not what we want. But even if they do not die, they are not getting that traction to move out of poverty and be able to sustain themselves. So they have challenges of supervision, challenges of implementation of government programs, and we need to say what exactly has happened to the local governments, what has happened to the central government, because it's across the board. One of the messages we want to say is elite capture. The elites within government and their compatriots outside government who have taken over government. And now they are running government from the corner. The Honorable Speaker has just left here. But you heard how she had to move to get a certain investigation going on. Sign die, sign die, sign die. That is how you get government back. Somebody has got to say, I'm not moving until that stupid order has been vacated. And there are many stupid orders in government. They need to be vacated. There are many offices occupied by people, I don't want to use the same word, but at least people who are not delivering something that is different. You need to vacate these fellows out. How do you take action on these issues? Otherwise, the government programs will continue on paper, and the inequality will continue to grow. So how do we really make this an action point? How do we change this? It's not about budgets. The 3.4% is a lot of money, by the way, in agriculture. We should be seeing something more than that. It is small, it is scattered, but it is something. We could have gotten something out of it. 800 billion, 1 trillion, that's not small money. We can get something, but you need to reform the agricultural institution. You need to deal with the technologies. This thing that we praise ourselves of services, actually the IMF report shows that, and it is true also when you look at who is among the 8 who own more than the 3.5 billion. It is the technology-savvy individuals. Technology has literally ruined the world, that now we need to tax certain institutions the way we tax individuals. Honorable Ksamba Mugerwa certainly pays more tax than me, just because he earns more. So why should a certain bank, I don't want to mention a name because headed by my friend, be taxed at 30% when also a certain small company is also taxed at 30%? We need to say as you graduate in profits, taxes are going to also graduate higher and higher. We need to revisit that. What we're doing on income taxation, we should also do on corporate taxation. Because now technology is giving fewer people more money. And we need to find other ways of getting that more money. Otherwise, you know, to resolve the issue of illicit financial flows, profit, repatriation, and all this inequality. Mobile money has just rendered majority of the bank tellers useless. You walk into certain banks, the tellers are not there because we're all doing mobile money. But who is earning that money on the mobile money? Not individuals. This is the inequality. Even the person who invested in a house, ATMs don't rent houses, ATMs don't educate children, ATMs don't pay school fees or they don't fall sick. But remember, somebody is earning out of them having replaced a bank teller who was doing all those things. So inequality versions have taken different shapes that we need to be much wiser than before. We cannot continue with the status quo. One more minute. Going forward, I have already said most of these things that I have said. We need to take action. We need to have vacation of certain stupid orders, and some institutions, the word stupid, I will put it in quotes, are actually that. There are certain local governments that are literally non-functional. Let's revisit decentralization. It's not working. It used to work. It was intended to work. As we speak, it is not working. We cannot bury our heads in the sand. We need to move to regional tier. Let's move to some of these options. Let's remove some of the issues that are land grabbing. Yesterday we proposed anybody who has been involved in issuing a false land title, that district board should be sacked. I don't want to deal with headquarters because there they receive instructions from the districts. Why should you cancel 1,000 land titles and the district land board is continuing? This is Kisanja Kuna Mchezo, Honorable Kisamba Mugerwa. We don't want a Kisanja Mugerwa, we want a Kisanja Kuna Mchezo and Kisamba Mugerwa together. So we need to take serious action. Thank you very much, Charles.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fred Muhumuza. Somebody whispered to me, sometimes we tend to think that people like you are celebrities and everybody knows about you and who you were, but somebody told me they actually needed to know who you were. Dr. Fred Muhumuza is an independent researcher with expertise in economics, econometrics, development economics, and consumer economics. What better person to choose for this presentation? Thank you very much, Dr. Fred Muhumuza.
Thank you very much. We're still coming to you live from Serena, the Katonga Hall, and it's the launch of the Oxfam Inequality Report. The question is, who is growing?
And our hashtag is inequality, End Inequality UG. The hashtag is End Inequality UG. You can join the discussion from wherever you are, so we keep talking about the inequality situation in Uganda.
Always the risk of recognizing some people and not others is that you miss some important people. I'll make mention. We mentioned Dr. Kisamba Mugerwa. Let me also make mention that we have the IMF country representative, Miss Clara Mira, with us in the audience. You're most welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, we're moving into the part of this report where we can be able to strip it apart, understand it, and locate ourselves in it and our responsibilities. Oxfam and the partners have brought together a wide range of people. We have district leaders. Someone was talking about decentralization, and Godba was asking, where did it work? Maybe we'll be told later. But we have district leaders amongst us. We saw some 2 members of parliament. We have people from civil society, from the church, from development partners, academics or academicians, whichever way you take it, and some students. So let's get into the discussion. I'd like to invite the following people to move and occupy these seats, tell us from their fields of expertise, and we'll also ask some questions about this report. May I invite to join us from Kampala City Traders Association. Kasita. Issa Sekito.
You're welcome, Mr. Issa Sekito. Actually, when you talk about Kasita, do you know people call him Kasita? People think he's Kasita. So when you talk of Kasita, people actually think of Mr. Sechito. He is called Mr. Issa Sechito. He's not Kasita.
May I invite Professor Julius Kiza from Makerere University to come and join us in the panel here. I haven't seen Irene Ovonji. Irene Ovonji? Yes, I can see where she is. Yes. The Honorable Irene Ovonji, Chief Executive Officer of FIDA and Chairperson of the Board of Action Aid International.
And a renowned women's rights activist. You're welcome.
Irene's titles are very many. She represented us in the East African Legislative Assembly.
Oh, there's so many. If we started listing them, we would spend the whole night here.
Stella Grace Lutalo, Country Coordinator of Participatory Ecological Land Use Management, Pelham, Uganda. Please join us. Anything lastly? We're going to invite.
Clearly, last but not least.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Let's invite Dr. Kisamba Mugera. He's known as the Minister of Entandikwa.
Minister of Entandikwa.
The Chairperson of the National Planning Authority. You're welcome, Doctor. Well, he said he had retired from active politics, but he still has a lot to offer, as we are going to hear.
Okay, for the panelists, we have microphones on those small tables there. There's a button, you press it, and once it turns red, speak into the microphone. But remember to turn it off when your chance for speaking is out, so that we don't get feedback. I want to start with the National Planning Authority. Dr. Kisamba Mugerwa. The plans for the country are incubated, or are supposed to be incubated at the National Planning Authority. But as we see from this report, whereas poverty numbers have been going down, inequality has been rising, and what many people don't discuss is the fact that there is a number of Ugandans, in raw numbers, if you take it outside percentages, that remains permanently stuck in poverty. The last I checked, we're doing about 7.5 million Ugandans permanently stuck in poverty. What at the planning level? What at government level? Looking at this report and its findings, are you doing to try and redress some of these glaring challenges?
First and foremost, thank you, moderator, and I would like to thank Oxfam for having invited me. I always come in whenever there's civil society discussion because they tend to be focused and analytical. But also, I tend to associate with them because if you let them go alone, they miss the direction. As you had Professor Niwagaba presenting, he said there's no point talking about growth. After all, Uganda is growing. But let us talk about why not is it inclusive. Yes, we need to know why Uganda is growing, and then we know there are measures to make it inclusive. It is true that poverty has been reducing in terms of percentage, but even absolute numbers, the number is big because of some dynamics like population growth rate. We need to handle the population growth rate. The fertility rate here, it has just dropped from 7 to something like 6.3. The growth rate has just dropped from 3.2 to 3. That's very marginal. We need to work more. In fact, the experts are telling me that if you were to realize the middle income status in terms of the Vision 2040, the base I used of four children per woman is too big. It should go to 2. But talking to a Ugandan now, about 2 children, one would run out at least 4. So there are measures on working on the demographic dimensions in terms of reproductive health. But as you work on it, even if people are lasting more and more, because infant mortality is reducing, maternal mortality is reducing, all those you should know. Then on the other side, yes, some people are using the word permanently. No, they are not permanently. A section is stuck in poverty, and it is mainly in the rural area. Unfortunately, there is a misconception that whoever is in the rural area is a farmer. I live in a rural area in Bamnanika. Quite a number of them are not necessarily farmers. They are stuck in the rural area. What we need to do is to invest in those areas like industries and services where they can go, even in agriculture. What we have done, we have identified the agriculture, oil and gas, minerals, because they have a multiplier effect along the value chain. They create employment so that they can be absorbed, including tourism. So we need to, agriculture is tricky, is important. I agree with the submission that we need to invest more in agriculture, but you should know, not only in primary production. If we invest more in primary production, we shall increase productivity and production. We shall need less and less people to produce what we need to feed the majority. So, but we need to handle agriculture along the value chain in order also in terms of transport, in terms of sorting, grading, and packaging, in terms of value addition, so that it creates employment, and then we can export and even feed the tourists who come here. And ourselves also, we need good standards. So measures are being made in that area. But also, there is also other measures, like because we are operating in sustainable development goals, which nobody should be left behind, and which is all-inclusive. That's why social protection issues, like universal primary education is a social protection matter. Like these handouts to elderly people is a social protection matter. But the coverage is still very small. These policies, we need to inject more. But where do you get that money? And that's why we are saying we need to make Uganda more competitive in terms of attracting investors, not only those from abroad, but even from within Uganda, so that they can get, the cost of production is low and they can get profit margin. And that's why we are investing in infrastructure in terms of roads, in terms of standard gauge railway, in terms of even national carrier, which I'm promoting. But as you are doing that, don't forget to invest into human capital development.
Thank you.
In terms of health, education, access to water, and the rest. So
thank you.
Things are being done.
Oh, I thought after spending some time back in Bamunanika, Dr. Kasamba Mugero had changed, but actually still the firebrand that we had many years ago. You touch on a number of issues which this report actually touches on, and I want to jump to Irene Ovonji and ask, you hear the listing of government initiatives. This report questions, one, that the investments government is making, is it making them in the right areas? If you have up to 78% to 80% of your population dependent on agriculture, so locked out. Professor asked us, who of our mothers works with MTN or with a major bank? Couldn't answer that question. But the other thing that this report touches on is, yes, you're talking about education. Education, which is supposed to be an equalizer, is no longer available as an option to equalize our society. So where do those, because you have worked at high levels for very many years in terms of policy making and framing, you have listened to Professor Kasamba Mugero. You've seen the report. Do they speak together? Do they address the question of who is growing?
Thank you, Charles, and good afternoon, both to those in the room and those who are watching on television. I'm not an economist. Let me give that caveat. I'm a lawyer. But there is a phrase we have in law where we say res ipsa loquita. In Latin, the facts speak for themselves. So you're asking me whether the investments are being put in the right place, and I would say the facts speak for themselves. You know, one of the targets that we have as a country is to be middle income. I forget what the date was, whether it was 2018 or 2020. And I think the facts speak for themselves, whether by that date we'll actually be middle income status country. That is a reflection of whether the investments are working. Some years ago, I was in a process the East African community had initiated looking at how to fast-track political federation. So as part of that team from the region, we analyzed the factors of success for federation. And one of the things that we found, well, there were several, but one of them was that in order to have a viable federation, political, you had to address the prior stages of regional integration that the East African Treaty talks about, which prior stages were to do with economic and social integration. And you had to do them in such a way that the citizens of the countries benefited from those. So if you have a customs union, which is about free movement of trade in goods, who are trading in goods? Who are producing those goods? Are you investing as East African partner states in your citizens so that they are able to harness the opening up of borders to goods? Likewise, if you go to the common market and you have movement of labor, capital, and so on, who has the capital to invest in the other countries and benefit from the opening up of those borders? So likewise here, we have to look at the fundamentals within the economy. And in that study, we saw areas like agriculture as critical because of the way our economies are structured, which has been mentioned in this report and by the first two speakers, that we have primarily agricultural economies. Most of the citizens in these countries are in agriculture, including in Uganda. Years later, I visited Vietnam, and I was talking to, representing ActionAid International, and I was talking to the leadership, the political leadership of the country, about Vietnam is a middle-income status country. And it's not a projection, it's actual. You actually see it. And I've traveled to different parts of the country, including the rural, and you could see the investment. They invested in their people. That was one of the areas that they started with. In health, in education, the services that Dr. Nwagaba talks about. But what struck me when I was asking, how do we ensure we have South-South cooperation and we benefit from these lessons that you have used here to develop your country, largely without development assistance. And what they said to me was, you have to look at your own political economy as a country and have policies that relate to that. So you're not going to transplant something from another country and apply it exactly like that and it will operate. It will not. So your particular political economy is important, but the issue of leadership, governance, is primary to drive that. So we may have areas which are relevant, but I do think that the distribution of the public resources is not right. I think there are areas that should be receiving much more, but even within specific sectors, say if you look at agriculture, you look at education, whatever it is, the distribution even within that should be more to those who are vulnerable, to those who need support. But what we have is a skewed system. So those who have more is given. All these incentives that we see, take for example for investment. In this country for too long, the view is that an investor is a foreign person. An investor is anybody who's putting money into something to develop it. So you have citizens of different levels, people working in small, medium enterprises and so on, who are making investments, but they are not policies that support them to enable them to access credit, to enable them to access land. If I'm a wealthy multinational corporation or a wealthy Ugandan politician and so on, I'm more likely to get free land than a poor person or poor trader or poor farmer who needs land and is investing and wishes to invest in that. So what we have is really skewed towards the powerful, the rich, the connected. And that is why we have growing inequality in this country. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Irene. I'll now turn to Professor Julius Kiza. The report points to the fact that Uganda is a state under captivity. Most of the investment decisions and choices are made somewhere in those countries that actually provide the funding. To what extent do you agree to this? And if so, what can be done to address this and change, bridge this inequality gap? Because most of the investment decisions, we see the budget allocations going to, the big chunk of it going to things like security and at the expense of sectors like education and health, which actually have a direct positive impact on the population. So do you agree to this in the first place, and what can be done?
Yeah, the problem with this friend of mine, she asks many questions in one. Now, when she says, do you agree to this? I don't even know which one.
The fact that Uganda is a state in captivity, a nation in captivity.
Yes. There is a fundamental problem of state capture. And the capture, conventionally, is attributed to foreign forces, defined as foreign national interests, sometimes organized in form of foreign aid, which is defined as assistance, but driven by the agenda of furthering the interest of the donor. But oftentimes we forget that, you see, state capture has two phases, not one. The first phase, which I think is fundamentally important, is the national phase. There is it is Dr. Martin Luther King who said, no one will ride your back unless it's bent. So if there is any foreigner riding your back, it is because your back is bent. And therefore the solution is not to continue blaming foreigners. The fundamental solution is to raise your back. And this applies even at a social class level. If you think you're a victim of gender discrimination, if you think you're a victim of oppression, the fundamental problem might be yourself. What have you done to ensure that you address your vulnerabilities, to ensure that you straighten your back, and therefore nobody rides your back? Now, this is not to say that there are no vested foreign interests. They are always there, and they are permanent. The foreign interests are permanent. Let's make no mistake. But countries that have addressed these foreign interests sustainably, Taiwan, Korea, Japan, etc., Vietnam, these are countries that have said, look, we must define our problem in terms of what's doable within the jurisdiction of our state. And so we can do certain things right. If we put up a fight, define our priorities right, and ensure that public funds, whether they are collected nationally or gotten from donors, are used for developmental purposes, not luxurious expenditure, then we put things right. And then we stop blaming foreigners. So as I said, the foreign interests exist, and they cannot be wished away. They only metamorphose into something different. So on that question of whether there is capture, I'm inviting you to consider the fact that the fundamental problem of state capture is with our elites. The elites we have are fundamentally parasitic. We have an elite which will invest massively in an electoral process to purchase electoral loyalty, only to get in parliament and prioritize one thing: how do I pay myself? Using the sweat and blood of the peasants. Elite capture also manifests in the arena of misdefining developmental priorities. If you look at NDP2, the emphasis is put on some of the following. Tourism. Of course, tourism is one of them. The second one is, and this one should have gone into the National Director of Planning Authority. So tourism is one. The second one is oil, the petroleum, the extractive sector. The third one, I don't quite remember. I wish somebody could remind me. But what seems to be cutting across is the emphasis on sectors that bring us closer to the extractives, to nature. So our development priorities are fundamentally defined in terms of our state of nature. And this is appearing whether we define tourism. Tourism is a service, high quality service. We are told by economists, low investment. So you can earn a lot by investing little. But tourism has to become smart. There are people visiting our national parks now with videos, 3D. And they get nice pictures which they can take to their countries, and they have little time and little interest in coming to pay money here directly. So because of that threat, we need to understand that tourism is a stepping stone, but we need to win off tourism, which is, in my view, a commodity service. The other issue is to do with agriculture. The presenter is lamenting the decline in the share of agriculture as a proportion of the GDP. Yes, and I think we have to be careful. A healthy economy must necessarily involve a substantial decline of the primitive economic activities, and agriculture is one of them. Primitive agriculture, which depends on rain given by the gods from above. If you have to wait for the gods above to send rain for you to irrigate farms, then you are in a very primitive sector. If the Minister of Finance will say we can't realize our growth targets because the gods have not sent us rain in time, then you are in a crisis. So the point is that the sectors that are being defined as priorities need redefinition. We need to focus on high-tech manufacturing. We need to focus on high-tech services. We need to focus on sectors that will enable us to get smart. That way, within our national economy, the elite are captured because they are defining things that are non-transformative. They are promoting growth with no structural transformation. Very finally, our elites are captured at the level of ideology, the level of worldview. The worldview of our elites, dominated by the Minister of Finance, and I don't see many of them here, is a worldview that is made in Washington, D.C. It is the worldview of economic liberalism. It is a worldview of the advanced, the smart economies, not our own. Now, the history of development is clear. You cannot use a blanket economic ideology to develop all countries. When countries are still growing, they need the ideology of economic nationalism. It is when they have matured into high-tech manufacturing, into high-tech services, that economic liberalism becomes the appropriate economic ideology.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Kiza.
We're avoiding asking the panelists many questions because we want to bring it to you so that you can ask the questions instead of us being the ones asking the questions. Mr. Issa Sekito, the private sector and its responsibility. One of the major debates actually is that you guys at Kasita control a lot of money, but you're also responsible for bringing in a lot of foreign goods instead of putting that money into local manufacturing and therefore employing more people and getting more people to earn a living. And most of the inequality is actually evident in the private sector. In a capitalist society, that is acceptable, it's understandable, but the question is, how does it affect your overall profitability if it's not addressed?
Well, this audience is lucky to have among itself a farmer in the forests of Boa in Ruero, a trader who is struggling to maintain middle income status, and a self-made consultant that is advising the business community on how not to fail their businesses, and a neighbor to Dr. Kisamba Mugerwa, the National Chairman Planning Authority. It is very, very good that you receive the view from the ordinary citizens of Uganda, whose mind, it seems, are occupying a bigger part of my mind, apart from being a professional accountant. I live with so many illiterate traders and farmers when I go to Boa there, that they have made me to think the way they do. And this is, they are wondering at the professors and doctors who do not seem to realize that for every country to grow, there must be concentration to the comparative and competitive advantages of the country in question. And some of these ordinary citizens draw us to Vietnam, which I have visited, is now the second largest grower of coffee, not a picture they had 20 years ago. They draw pictures of China and how the Chinese did not amount about international organizations until they ably demarcated China following the comparative advantage of the country called China. What do they mean? The ordinary people think that for over 30 years, Uganda elites have failed to transform Uganda basing on the comparative and maybe the competitive advantage. What do they mean? They give examples like, while there was a Kone war, to curb it and have it in remnants, we had to allocate 23% of the national budget, and the Kone is a remnant. When we had no electricity, over 80 trillion, if I'm not mistaken on the figure, a very sizable amount of money was allocated to it, and we have it, although still expensive, but it is available. What they are saying is, they have been waiting for a year when the parliamentarians and the cabinet, plus all the planners, would advocate a single year through what we call priority budgeting, and we dedicate it to agriculture. Such we have modern facilities, we have tractors, and the next thing we would be planning are the buffer stocks for the excess of what we shall have planted. If this has eluded the country for over 30 years, where is the magic? How it is eating deep into the business community. I do not sell a TV to any of the panelists here because they travel to Dubai, they travel to the US. I get the money from my shop on Market Street from the farmer. If the farmer has no disposable income, my shop is irrelevant. Therefore, we need to tap into the majority of the population basing on the comparative advantage, which is unquestionable agriculture. And then we add value on their mind, which is the competitive advantage now, to make them effective, such that they have a penny to spend on what I do. Ladies and gentlemen, unless we did this, I thought Professor Nwagaba had picked this. He has taught me that one of the countries that has successfully done this is Mauritius. They use it, priority budgeting. They have now the best internet in Africa. They have the best roads. We are waiting for a year they will be declared as the best agriculturists around the globe. Therefore, if we have seen that all the organic products that we have in Uganda are the best in the region, why are we concentrating on the petty businesses that the Kasita people are doing? Let them do them while they have people to come and spend. If you live in Uganda, you might be thinking that inequality is part of the game. I don't want to mention how the inequality at Uganda Revenue Authority has made businesses collapse. I don't want to mention how the selective implementation of laws by the Uganda National Bureau of Standards have made some collapse and others thrive. I will not mention the cheats that some politicians use and then they burst from certain products. This, I have been talking about this for long. There are products in Uganda where other Ugandans cannot trade against the privatization principle. And the thing is patronage from the state authorities. So, this thing, inequality, is a very sensitive thing. There was a closure of Ukraine Bank. People were looking at Sudiri, and many of you were cursing, including those who think that by him charging in $1, he was making a mistake. Ladies and gentlemen, the middle class that my brother is talking about is now threatened on how to thrive. You know what has happened? Because of the takeover, for which money we don't know how much was put in by the other bank, I don't want to mention names, the new arrangement is that the landlords and all people who had loans in the Ukraine Bank are now being forced to complete within 3 months maximum, even for loans that were for 10 years. The implication meaning they go back to the tenants and they are asking for contracts for 10 or 5 years, therefore closing the businesses. Any farm you see in the villages today either belongs to a farm, a trader in Chikubo, or a politically well-placed person. If a trader is also eliminated under the middle class capacity, under such actions, ladies and gentlemen, we are not heading anywhere. The way we measure growth is looking at the per capita incomes. If we all shared our incomes within this room and we divided it by the working population, we should have a very fat per capita income. Equate it to the general population and we shall all be poor. So while the per capita income is rising, the poverty levels are also following suit. The only solution, yes, ladies and gentlemen, is to sacrifice a year and dedicate it to agriculture and let us try. We have tried on others. Why don't you try on it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll put our next question to Stella Grace Lutalo. Catherine?
Yes, Stella, we know that land grabbing is one of the big drivers of inequality in this country. The land being given to big investors, while the poor are actually left landless and even poorer. Now, just asking, what's the best way? We want the investments. We want the big investors to come and, push this economy forward. But how best can we handle the land question so that the poor are given chance to also grow while the investors also bring in the money?
Okay. Thank you very much. I will first of all emphasize the fact that agriculture is the backbone of our economy, and the majority of the people who have spoken before have also alluded to that. And we also know that the sector is dominated by smallholder farmers. That's 96%, about 95, 96% are smallholder farmers that are scattered all over the country. And this category of farmers are the ones that are dominating the rural poor in the country. And we also must realize that agriculture is on land. Land is a major factor of production. If we do not have the land question right, then agriculture would be affected. Yet it's a sector that is very much capable of taking the rural poor out of poverty in the country. So when we see the realities of land issues today, we find that most of our smallholder farmers are very insecure on the land because there is a lot of land grabbing, both by the local nationals and both by the nationals, big investors, but also by foreign investors on land. And whereas investment is good, but it should not be at the expense of our own development of our own people on issues that would get us out of the inequality question. So what I'm saying is that we need to take on the foreign direct land investments with caution. How are the rights of the citizens protected in the process of these land transactions? We have most of the land tenure under customary, where the powers are invested in a few people to make decisions on giving away the land. And they're at a disadvantage because the investors are a lot more powerful and the negotiation is not on a leveled ground. So we propose that where such investments are, the rights of the smallholder farmers must be protected, because the land rights for smallholder farmers are not just for production. They also affect their ability to access credit. We all know that for agriculture to develop, it must have credit. For farmers to get out of subsistence farming to commercial, they need credit. And we have a lot of challenges that these farmers are facing, like collateral, because they do not have such property. And this affects women even more, because women rarely own land, and yet they dominate the labor force in agriculture. So we not only look at land issue, the land issue, we also look at their access to credit. We also look at their access to extension. Because when extension services are being given to farmers, they look out for model farmers with certain characteristics. Do they at least have land? Do they have some finance? Do they have, some basic minimal criteria to qualify as a model farmer, and land being one of them. So it still puts the farmers at a disadvantage when they do not have land. That means it will affect their ability to access extension. Yet extension is very key in promoting production and productivity, and which would translate into commercialization and improvement of the livelihoods of farmers.
Okay, thank you very much, Stella. It's no doubt the panelists are in agreement that the inequality issue is really a big problem, or at least from what I've heard. Don't you agree? So the big question this afternoon is who is growing? The question is, we are in agreement that inequality is a big problem, but who is growing? So Charles, we're going to open up the discussion and let in questions from the audience so you can ask the hardest questions. Hit them with the hardest questions because they have all the answers. But just remind you, we are broadcasting live on NTV, and our hashtag is #EndInequalityUG in case you want to join the discussion. It is the Oxfam release of launch of the Inequality Report 2017.
We actually have the Twitter feed. They're being uploaded here so you can see. Would like to open this up to the audience to give us your views, discuss. Knowledge is not centered here. Knowledge is distributed equally in this room. So let's hear from you.
There are ladies with microphones.
Yes.
Just put up your hand, and the lady will come right to. Oh,
okay.
Godba, that's a shortcut. You jumped the queue.
Catherine, I'll ask the lady to excuse me. We'll select who speaks first. No. So can you take that microphone back from the senior Mufuruchi? I'll explain why. Let me request, because we have an audience out there, if you're making your contribution, please stand up and tell us briefly who you are and ask your question or make a comment. So can we start with Godba Tumshave, and then Leonard, I'll come to you later. Sorry. Please. Just stand. When people put up their hands, we'll point you to who is going to make a comment.
Yeah. My name's Godba Tumshave. And I work with the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies as an associate director. And really, I want to make 3 specific comments. One is to really ask the audience, especially those who are as old as I am, who were around in 1997. And if we can dial back to 1997 and listen to our elder, Kisamba Mugerwa, whether actually what he said is different from what we said in 1997. 1997 is when we adopted the Poverty Eradication Action Plan. And we talked about agriculture, and we talked about health, and we talked about education. So I really find it, like Wilberforce said, he enjoys attending these civil society meetings because of the reasons he gave. I find these meetings actually frustrating because of how much we are repeating ourselves. Secondly, Augustus talked about Uganda has experienced phenomenal growth. I think that as Uganda and Africa, I think we are too patient with ourselves. We like celebrating marginal achievements. Uganda is growing at about 4.5%. It has grown at 7%. But man, if you have a shamba where you always produce 2 bags of coffee and you grow at that rate and then you celebrate it, there is really a problem. So I don't think that that is something to celebrate. Yes, we are growing, but to celebrate that means that we are comfortable in our zones. And what we need is a shock therapy to get out of the zones that we are in. But every time we come here and say, oh, we are growing, Uganda has been growing phenomenally, I think we are deceiving ourselves, and we need to change that. Finally, I think that we need to reflect, because government over the last, actually I should say the last 30 years, because sometimes when we talk about 30, then many of us are branded opposition because we are criticizing NRM. But actually I lived in a time when I knew that this country could feed itself, when we grew coffee and it educated me. But for the last 30 years, I think we have killed two important sectors that would actually address inequality: agriculture and education. Because agriculture, we have killed it because we have bastardized it by creating all kinds of things that are uncoordinated. Wilberforce, if you can help us, you are the top policy maker. You just go to that Ministry of Agriculture, get all those things called NADS, Coffee Development Authority, Cotton Development Authority, Operation Wealth Creation. All of them, what they do is to distribute seeds. What else do they do? You can have one CEO overseeing distribution of all those seeds there. But the bastardization that we have made that sector to be is really a big problem, and we want to be able to move. Education. I know that I don't have a lot of time, but I want to just to tell the audience that I've been following up education, because that's one of the areas where we say we've made phenomenal achievement by sending every kid to school. Me, I go to my village, I see the kids in the village. And so I went back to UBOS reports and said, let me see, where are these kids coming from if they are in school? So I started looking at the enrollment data for P1 and PROE, the students who sat for PROE. My comparison now is that for the 11 years of PROE, we have 19 million children unaccounted for between primary 1 and primary 7. And me, I want NPA to tell me that that's a lie, because that means that UBAS has been telling us a lie for 11 years. And that means that government has been stealing from us if those kids are not there.
Thank you very much.
So we just need to be, I think we need to be brutally honest with ourselves that addressing the problem of inequality is going to take much more transformational actions, not the kinds of knee-jerk interventions that we're having all the time.
Thank you very much, Godba.
Dr. Kisamba Mugerwa, you have had the questions. Agriculture is close to the heart of Dr. Kisamba Mugerwa, because he himself being a farmer and having served at the highest levels, both in the country and internationally in agriculture. So he'll tell us what the coffee situation is in Bamunanika, which he represented in Parliament for some years. And he also tell us, where are those children, those Ugandan children? 11 million? 19 million. 19 million. You enter 2 million in primary 1, and then you exit 500,000 at the end of 7 years. And are those the ones going to drive the transformation that you talked about? Leonard Okello had his hand on the microphone, and then we removed it, and democratically. So can he get it back?
Yeah, thank you very much. I understand democracy sometimes can be frustrating.
It's guided democracy, they say.
Yeah. I will make a few comments. I'm not going to ask a question. Hopefully it'll help you to think through. One of the things, I've heard all your concerns. What I think I've not heard very much, which I would like to hear more from you, is the how to deal with the problem. And because of that, I'm going to raise one or two things and ask you how to deal with it. One is the cost of government. This government is very expensive. Very expensive government in a country which is called poor. How? When I travel to the UK or to US, especially the UK, I meet the Prime Minister. I met Tony Blair when he was sitting. He came with a vehicle and another small one behind him, and that was it. But when my president goes to the airport, a whole battalion or two goes with him to the airport, plus tens of ministers to see him off, with dancers dancing away when the visitors come. These are not serious jokes. That's the cost of government. The second thing about the cost of government is a skewed budget. The budget is so skewed to maintain the higher level of government. An average ministry has about 50% check of management, coordination, and supervision cost in their budget. Go and check. I'll have checked this. The second thing is State House costs us about 600 million shillings per day. Per day expenditure of State House. In fact, as of last year was 665 million shillings per day. Okay? Then, as opposed to only 16% going to local government, which are supposed to deliver the services, and you're talking about inequality will be there. I mean, you will sort inequality. And then 665 million per day compared to 450,000 shillings per quarter per health center 3, where the very same women who vote us into office, into State House, go for giving birth. Now, just there is a skewed budget that makes government too expensive. We must do something to cheapen government, and we can make it cheaper.
What is that something?
And that something is we must restructure the cost of the management level and the executive level of government downwards. We can do it. The second thing causing the cost of government is corruption or theft of public money. I would like to say, these Ugandans seated here, when we started talking about the corruption in this country, some of them told us, asked me later, don't you have something else to do to talk about corruption? Ugandans seated in this room, some of them, one or two people also told me that same question, asked me that question, are in this room. Can you imagine? Can you imagine a Ugandan, your money is being stolen, I talk about it, and then you tell me, Leonard, don't you have something else to do for you to be talking about corruption? What can we do about it? Your money is being stolen because you have allowed it to be stolen. Cost of government, very high. The cost of government is high. The second big problem making the cost of government high is that, Ms. Dr. Momoza, is he here? There is no decentralization, my brother. Decentralization went long time back. We now have districtization. The creation of many, many little districts and little districtlets, which are very expensive, whose chief administrative officers, financial controllers, and district chairpersons have homes and children in Kampala. They are always coming for workshops and seminars in Kampala because their families actually live in Kampala, not in Kotido or Kabong. They are actually not related with their district they are managing. They live in Kampala. That's why the cost of managing them, they have to create some money to travel to Kampala because their wives and children actually live for good education in Kampala. The cost of government is very expensive because everybody, including Kisama Mugerwa, is running a project. Projectizing government cannot be the way to deliver development and deal with inequality. When every government serious decision is about projects, the cost of big cars become very expensive and therefore the cost of government rise. We must resolve that one of the big things to do is to reduce the cost of government, including the cost of flying around, going for treatment abroad and all those. I would like to suggest, answer number one, reduce the cost of government and move that money to do real production and marketing of those things we produce.
Thank you.
Okay.
In order to do that well, let us reorganize citizens' forms of production. That's why I'm very passionately working with cooperatives at the moment.
Thank you very much, Leonard.
Thank you very much.
There are hands this side at the back. If you could just move towards the back. There are hands there. Yes, give it to the gentleman. I'm going to ask that we make our questions or comments really brief so that we give chance to more people to have a chance to comment or participate in this debate. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much. And I would like to appreciate the panels and the presenters. My name is Onduri Machulu Fred, economist by profession and also a social worker. I would like to mention three things. One, we've had such discussions before, right in the next, the hall down here, a wonderful discussion. Now I'm asking this meeting, these are very useful contributions that are coming from here. What is the destination of the outcome of this meeting? Can it cause change? Can it cause actions? What do we intend to come to do with all this outcome of the discussion here? It is very important that we try to see if this can be incorporated in our national plan. And I'm happy to see Professor Dr. Honorable Kisamba Mugera seated right there. And I'm sure he's taking this on board because there are many important issues coming here. The other issue is comparative advantage, which was emphasized by one of the members of the panel. I'll just go ahead to give example. Recently, we know that we experienced a long drought, which caused problem to our agriculture. But this is a very rare case in Uganda compared to the southern part of Africa and compared to our neighbors Kenya and Tanzania. We have a comparative advantage in that we always have at least a fair weather compared to our neighbors. And when we decide to allocate resources to the agricultural production, we can realize even produce to supply to our neighboring market. But what is lacking is the guidance, political direction, and the technical direction from the government and other stakeholders. So we need to emphasize on this. Lastly, I would like to say that marketing information. As I mentioned, that in the southern part of Africa, you'll find Zimbabwe, Zambia, every year having problem of shortage in food supply, when Uganda has got plenty. There should be a database and a way of tracking information about the market status so that Ugandans can be encouraged to produce and market the foods in Kenya, in Zimbabwe, in Zambia. Otherwise, I will give an example that there was a time they made a call to Ugandans to produce a lot of maize because there was a market. That was done promptly, and Ugandans ended up selling their maize at 200 shillings because the market collapsed immediately. Okay. That is to show how Uganda has got the capacity and the comparative advantage.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Thank you for those comments. I think we'll take about 5 questions, and then we get the panelists to answer. If you have a question that's direct, that you're directing to one of the panelists or all of them, let's take 5 questions because we've had comments.
There was a hand of a lady here. She had her hand on the microphone before. We'll pick the lady and then we'll go to the extreme end at the back.
Thank you. Atkwasa Rita is my name. I work with the Institute for Social Transformation. One question, I think I'll give it to Irene Ovonji. The report has clearly showed that women and youth are heavily excluded. That's what brings us here. And I would also want to imagine that majority of those youth must be female. So in your examples that you are trying to share, could you please pick out how does that relate to the empowerment of women? And of course, my general comment to this report is gender inequality is the mother of all inequalities. And I would have expected maybe Professor Nwagaba to be very vivid on this angle. Because with our government and with the National Planning Authority, it is very clear. I think even the National Development Plan might not stand a test if you put the gender equity certificate to it, because it completely ignores or puts issues of women and youth at the periphery, and yet the census tells us they are the majority. So to Kisamba, could we try a test that the next National Development Plan passes the gender and equity test? 2, to Professor Nwagaba. It is perceived in this country, when you listen to the radio, the TV, that there are individuals who we think have amassed wealth that I would expect they were going to be flagged in this report as the richest. But the report tells me that they are technological service individuals who own the riches in this country. Can you be more elaborate? Where are these individuals hiding? If it is not true, then can we use this report to correct the misconception in this country?
Thank you.
And then lastly, I think we need to know how much does it cost this economy for us to ignore women and youth?
Okay, I think you made the point already.
Thank you very much.
There's a lady next to you.
Let's go to the extreme end, to the back.
Can we pick this lady first as we go to the extreme end? The lady here in the middle? Madam? Yes. And then let someone stand at the back, at the extreme end.
Okay, thank you very much. You may call me by the name Sasio Grace, but I think I have to beg some little bit of excuse because of language barrier. So I think my concern goes to agricultural production. Like we have seen the report, Actually, I don't know how that report can really very much convince me in a way it has come out, because I think when this report was done, I wish it was done when it was only on the rural communities. Then the results would have come out. I think I would have been convinced better. But also above that, on agricultural production, in a way we are now realizing that climate change is actually bringing problems to agricultural production. I think if we continued doing this research, it will be vice versa. So my concern now goes to us, the peasant farmers. Production has been based on rainfall, and that has been our actually main opportunity of accessing all that we needed. But now, since that change is now taking place, I do not know, is the government having a plan that is actually going to be addressing the climate change that we are almost actually reaching to within the next 2 years, 3 years? I don't know what is going to happen. Is the project, is the government or even other partners thinking of other ways that we can survive in the very way we have been surviving when we have been receiving rain? My comment to that, or my advice to that would have been, let the government look for a way of actually investing more money on agricultural production to address those challenges. And also in the same way, I think it is better for us in our communities to have some of maybe training centers to come up with some projects which could be better. Maybe like you can imagine, there are some projects which can be done also, and they can actually compensate in a way maybe we would have been having rainfall. Can the government actually help us to think of that? Have some agricultural training centers which are going to be sustainable so that it becomes our referral point as farmers, and we can catch up from there, and then we continue in production sustainably.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have
We'll
an
take
audience
3
following
more
us.
questions. Those are 2. We'll take 3 more, and then we'll get the panelists to answer.
Just before you take the 3 more, our TV audience, people following us on TV, you can send us your comments. We'll pick them, but we will be losing the TV audience shortly, but we'll continue the debate for at least another 10, 15 minutes. So the people going to speak next, kindly be democratic and make brief contributions so that others can contribute also. We're coming live to you from the Katonga Hall at Serena International Conference Center, and this is the launch of the Oxfam Uganda Inequality Report.
And our hashtag is in the discussion from wherever you are. We will hear your voice, or the world will hear your voice.
Thank you.